Unit 7, Lesson 3, Determining the Equation of Lines Algebraically. So today we're going to find out how to generate the equation of lines, specifically the parallel, perpendicular, vertical, and horizontal lines algebraically. So just remember that parallel lines are lines that have the same slope, and remember they will never cross. Perpendicular lines are those lines that have negative reciprocals for their slopes, and they're the lines that intersect at 90 degrees. Horizontal lines, remember we learned that they have special equations. The equations of their lines are just y equals whatever their y-intercept is, because their slope is 0. And vertical lines, they have a special equation because remember their slope is undefined, so we can't use the y equals mx plus b form of a line. So instead we use x equals a. And remember, a is just the special number where the vertical line crosses the x-axis. Okay, let's get right into an example. So determine the equation of a line that is parallel to this line and goes through this line. So remember, you always want to try and generate the slope somehow. Is there a clue in this question that can help us find the slope? Okay, here's the clue. The fact that it says it's parallel to y equals 2x minus 11 can help us find the slope of our line. So remember, parallel lines have the same slope. So if our line has to be parallel to this line, it must have the same slope. Okay, so we know the slope of our line is going to be 2. And we know a point that our line goes through. So from the last lesson, think about how you'd find the equation of a line if you're given a slope and a point. Hopefully you thought of using the slope point formula. Okay, so we have our m value, and then -3 is p, and 4 is q. So just plug everything in. Simplify inside the brackets. Then let's do distributive property to get rid of the brackets. And then let's combine our like terms. So our equation of a line that is parallel to y equals 2x minus 11 and goes through the point -3 and 4 is y equals 2x plus 10. Okay, determine the equation of a line that is perpendicular to y equals -4/3x plus 5 and passes through the point 1 and 9. So again, we need the slope. And is there a clue in this question that helps us find the slope? Okay, here's the clue. Perpendicular to y equals -4/3x plus 5. Okay, so the fact that it says it's perpendicular to y equals -4/3x plus 5 is a clue to finding the slope of our line. So we know that lines that are perpendicular to each other have negative reciprocals for slopes. So if our line is perpendicular to this line, the slope of our line is the negative reciprocal of this. So the slope of our line has to be, so remember, flip it, so 3/4, and make sure they're opposite signs. So this guy's negative, so our guy has to be positive. Okay, so there's our slope, and we know it passes through 1 and 9. Okay, so if you're given the slope and a point, use the slope point formula to find the equation of the line. Okay, so this is our P and this is our Q. Let's plug everything in. Okay, let's do distributive property. And let's combine our like terms. So let's turn 9 into a fraction. Okay. Now to add fractions, they must have the same base. So I need to turn 9/1 to a fraction that has 4 as a denominator. Okay, so to get from 1 to 4, I multiply by 4. So I have to do that to get my new numerator. So 9 times 4 is 36. Okay, now I can add these two together. And there's my final answer. So that's the equation of a line that's perpendicular to this line and passes through this point. Okay, so determine the equation of a line that is parallel to y equals 5 and passes through -5 and -8. So we don't have our slope, but we have a clue that will help us find our slope. That clue is the fact that our line has to be parallel to y equals 5. It means it will have to have the same slope as y equals 5. So what is the slope of y equals 5? Well, y equals 5 is a horizontal line that passes through 5 on the y-axis. So as soon as you can realize that this is a horizontal line, you should know what the slope of all horizontal lines are. Right? The slope of horizontal lines is always 0. So if our line is parallel to it, we know that parallel lines have the same slope. So our slope must also be 0. And then it passes through the point -3 and -8. Okay? So let's plug that into our slope point formula. So this is P and this is Q. So our slope is 0, P is -3, and Q is -8. Okay? Let's simplify inside the brackets. And then let's do distributive property. So 0 times x is just 0. 0 times 3 is also just 0, so that all cancels out, and we're left with just y equals -8. Okay, determine the equation of a line that is perpendicular to y equals 3 and passes through -1 and 5. So again, we're not given our slope, but we're given a clue to help us find the slope. That clue is perpendicular to y equals 3. Okay, so we know that perpendicular lines have negative reciprocals for slopes. So let's figure out what's the slope of y equals 3. Because then we just take the negative reciprocal of that and we get our slope. So y equals 3, what kind of a line is that? Y equals 3 is a horizontal line that passes through 3 on the y-axis. Okay, so that's their line. Now our line is perpendicular to that. So if their line is a horizontal line, the only types of lines that's perpendicular to horizontal lines are vertical lines. So our line must be a vertical line somewhere. Okay, so these are all vertical lines. Ours is going to be vertical. So what's the slope of all vertical lines? Remember, it's undefined, so that means our slope must be undefined. Okay, and then we know the point that our line passes through is -1 and 5. We're trying to come up with the equation of a line whose slope is undefined and passes through this point. So what's the special way that we write equations for lines that have undefined slopes? Or think, how do we write the equation of a vertical line? Remember, because their slopes are undefined, we can't write their equations as y equals mx plus b. Instead, they have a special equation that looks like this. X equals a number. Okay, and the number is wherever this line crosses the x-axis. So we just have to figure out where this line crosses the x-axis. Apparently our line crosses through -1 and 5. So that's about there, and then it's going to be a vertical line through that point. Okay? So obviously, since this is at -1 and this is at -5, where does it cross the x-axis? At -1, which is also just the x-coordinate of that point. So the equation of our line that is perpendicular to y equals 3 and passes through that point is x equals -1. Okay, so these sorts of questions, you just want to ask yourself, how can I find the slope first? What's my clue to help me find the slope? And then from there, see if you can find the equation.